We talk a lot about milestones in life, but the moments that really shape us don't actually happen in front of the cameras. And one day I just realized I don't really give a shit about performing anymore. I'm not really interested in pretending, but I notice, you notice your own milestones, and maybe that's the point to recognize them. Today, I want to talk about the invisible life milestones that nobody ever really talks about. There are no photos of the first time that I felt truly alone. I didn't get balloons. I didn't get a cake. I got no, pictures on Facebook, but I remember it clearly. I was just a little girl sitting at the top of the steps and I was listening to my parents argue downstairs. I wasn't being yelled at. I wasn't in trouble. I was a good girl. My parents were great parents. They were terrible to each other, but, at that moment I was invisible and I knew it because in that moment, I felt what so many of us feel long before we are even old enough to name it, and that's aloneness. And it really sticks. It's this kind of aloneness that shows up later. It shows up in the silence after a fight. It shows up in the ache of a room that used to feel safe, but now it just feels so far away. It shows up in the way that you learn not to ask for comfort because you've already decided no one's going to give it to you. So what's the point? And years after, that time on the steps, and trust me, there were many periods in between that, but I felt that aloneness again. And that time I wasn't, it wasn't at home. It wasn't quiet. It was, in a detox facility when I was detoxing from drugs. And I was in this foreign place. There was this fluorescent lighting. It was terrible. It was one of these unfamiliar places. And I was in pain physically, emotionally, spiritually, and no one could really sit there with me in it. No one could hug me and tell me it was going to be okay. And there were people everywhere, right? But I didn't know them. I definitely didn't trust them. And in that space, I had this thought that still makes me shiver, right? There's no one here for me. No one. And that's a milestone. And it's not the kind that anyone's going to clap for, but it's a real one. It's the kind that, you kind of carry with you. And it really carves this it carves something inside of you. We talk a lot about milestones in life, right? We've got birthdays and graduations and weddings and promotions and first homes and first steps, but the moments that really shape us don't actually happen in front of the cameras. They happen in silence, in small rooms, in decisions that we make alone, in those truths that we don't say out loud. Like the moment that you realize your parents were human and they were wrong too. And they weren't just wrong about the little things, right? They were wrong about the big things. And I think that's something that we all realize at some point. And it starts off slowly, right? We see their flaws a little bit. But then, I became a parent myself and I started to see it in full color, right? They really didn't have all the answers. They didn't always know how to protect you. They didn't know. And so we build these heroes in our heads. When we're little, we look at our parents like they know everything. They're superheroes. And those heroes start to dissolve. And it's not because we resent them. And some people do. Some people get some real resentment out of that. But because we're starting to see the world in a more realistic lens, right? These people didn't fail me because they were mean or evil. They failed me because they were limited. They did the best they could with the tools that they had. And their toolbox was not full. I was thinking about something else. There are milestones in how we even say no. When I was younger, I didn't say no to people. Sometimes I still don't say no to people, right? Especially with my son. I want to give him everything and be everything. And, you learn to be honest though. And these days I will not say yes unless I really mean it. And that doesn't mean I'm going to say no because I don't really say no, but I won't commit to something unless I know that I'm going to show up, because if I say it, I'm going to do it. And that's kind of in its own way setting a boundary, I think. And it's not loud. I don't mean to be dramatic about it, but it's mine. And it's sacred to me because if I say I'm going to do something for you, you are damn well that I'm going to be there doing it. Or I just won't say it. I just won't commit. There's a version of me that no one really expected to ever show up. This version of me that I'm living today wakes up early, makes lunch, gets my kid to school, gets to work, walks the dogs, refills the fridge. When my husband says he's out of deodorant, it just appears on the counter. And these things really might seem small to other people, but these are the things that were unthinkable for me once, especially when I was deep in addiction and the chaos. I didn't think that I'd ever be capable of managing an ordinary task, and forget everything else that I've got going on. Just the simplest task was really hard. And now I do it every day, and I do it quietly, and nobody cheers for me, but I notice it. And some days that's enough. Some days I still would love it if someone else recognized it, but that doesn't happen. You know, there have been so many versions of myself in just 37 years, and I've outgrown so many versions of myself, and there was no ceremony for it, right? No stepping up ceremony. No one said, wow, you've changed. It just happened. And I stepped out of chaos, right? I let go of the need to be liked. I stopped apologizing for who I am, right? I just am who I am, and that's it. You're either going to take it or you're going to leave it. There was no line drawn in the sand. It just kind of happens without you realizing that you've kind of graduated to another phase. And one day I just realized I don't really give a shit about performing anymore. I'm not really interested in pretending that I have it together, because I don't, right? I don't feel that I have anything together. I'm just a hot mess, and that's okay. Right? I feel things deeply. I don't always know what I'm doing. And ultimately, I just try to do no harm. I try to leave things a little bit better than I found them, or at least I try not to harm. But I'm not going to bend to everything. You're going to either take me or leave me. This is who I am. And again, I will not cause any harm. But I just am who I am. And that to me is a milestone, because I wanted to people please for so long. It's a private milestone, but it was life changing for me. And I think that we celebrate all these big moments, but I think that we should be celebrating the little ones more. Like, I don't know, the day that wasn't terrible. It was just like a random Tuesday where, everybody was just sitting around the table and no one was fighting. We just had a good conversation. Or, the day my dog actually listened to my command after I was training her for so long, or the first time my son said, I love you, without me saying it, like those little special moments. I don't know. I like standing at the sink and doing the dishes and being like, I'm okay. Maybe I'm not perfect, but it's okay. It's fine. Today is okay. And being okay with okay. And that's a milestone, but nobody really knows that except you. So if I could go back and sit with a younger version of me, maybe that girl at the top of the steps, or that younger woman or whatever she was sitting in a detox or rehab or wherever she was, I would hold her hands and I would say thank you, because she survived those things. And thank you for pushing through the loneliness. Thank you for staying when you didn't know what you were staying for. I would go back to each one of those versions of me and I would say thank you. Every time that they achieved one of those quiet milestones, I would say thank you, because that pain and that, quiet courage, that's what got me here. That's what got us here, I should say. And I know every day is not remarkable now. It's definitely not. And sometimes it's really boring, but the ordinary is sacred, because it was once unimaginable to me. So I would tell that younger version, or all the younger versions of myself, to just hold on, because you're building something. And one day it's not going to feel like survival anymore. It's just going to feel like living. And you're going to be okay with the fact that it's just living if you just push through. Those invisible milestones don't really come with diplomas. Right? Nobody gets a diploma. No one throws a party for me, even though I would love a party every day. No one even notices. But I notice, you notice your own milestones, and maybe that's the point, to recognize them.